We've talked a lot on this show about how we seem to be living in a time of what I like to call intersecting dystopias. We're in the third year of a global pandemic that has killed close to 1 million people in the U.S. alone. Climate change is putting the entire planet Earth at risk, as shown from record wildfires, floods, and drought. Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine poses the danger of a new world war and the end of the international order. Our own democracy is in grave danger from a Republican Party in the grips of an authoritarian movement. And the rights of all Americans to control their own reproduction are being ripped away, like in Oklahoma, where the governor just signed a near total ban on abortion. Friend of the show, Molly Jong-Fast, writes in The Atlantic that we are in a time of, quote, dread. But she says these dark days won't last forever. So I hope she's right. And Molly Jong-Fast joins us now to convince me she is. She's a contributing writer at The Atlantic and author of the newsletter, Wait, What? Which is a question I ask myself all the time. So you end your article with a sense of hope. I appreciate that. But before we get into that, I call this an intersecting dystopia. You've heard me say this before, whether it be here or on SiriusXM. Lay out for us and how the wave of state abortion bans and the Supreme Court ruling on Roe fit into the intersecting dystopia feeling we all have right now.
Yeah, that was a crazy, very depressing story. It started last August when the Republican governor, Greg Abbott, decided that he was going to take a shot at Roe. He passed a bill called SB 8. It was a bill that everyone, all the sort of smart court watchers said would absolutely never go anywhere and would be overturned. But in fact, it ended up staying in place. The Supreme Court looked at it on the shadow docket. They decided to leave it in place. And that single act really set in motion a bunch of other abortion bills. And that was the act where it was sort of a quiet nod that these 6 conservative justices would let Republican state legislators do whatever they wanted. And even if the bill, like this Texas bill, had a lot of crazy stuff in it, and it had deputies, and it had people being able to sue other people for, you could sue the Uber driver for taking you for an abortion. But that, letting that law stand on the shadow docket sent a message to other Republican legislators.
I mean, what you're describing, and when I think about intersecting dystopias, there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the Trump administration when The Handmaid's Tale first premiered on Hulu about how we were headed there. And black women everywhere were like, have you read a book? This is not some sort of fiction. This is, the enslavement of women has happened, if you include black women in your definition. But to the point, what should we be doing and sort of how should we be processing this fight against the loss of reproductive autonomy? I feel like that is central in the fight for liberty and freedom. It's not a side issue. It is the issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Democrats need to understand that their vote, and Republicans too, but I don't think Republicans necessarily care, but Democrats need to understand that this is important to their voters, right? That they want to have bodily autonomy over their own bodies. They do not want to have this right taken away from them. And the way that they're going to know that is by people calling their senators and congresspeople and writing letters to the president. I mean, this is ground zero here. American women are losing a right they have had for 50 years, and it's being taken away right in front of them. And, legislators don't care about things until they know their constituents do.
So important to understand all of that. And one of the things that you said in your piece, which I think really resonated with me, and I'm sure others, is it feels like there's so many terrible things happening just all at the same time. And it feels, as you said, we all feel that sense of dread, but it also feels paralyzing. Like, I don't know where to aim my energy at because every single crisis is existential, like the end of the world. But that's every single crisis could lead to that. Do we save democracy? Do we save Ukrainians? Do we try to save our own lives in the middle of a global pandemic where policy leaders clearly are not trying to do that? What do we do? How do we target that dread, that energy towards productive action to save ourselves, our country, our world?
My hope would be that we could focus as much as possible on Democrats really trying to cement democracy, voting rights, protecting elections, having hearings about this sort of coup d'etat that Trump world was launching. I mean, Democrats right now control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And they may not control it by very much, but they certainly control it by enough to have hearings and testimony and to get to the bottom of all of the layers of coup that happened in Trump world, because these elections, we need to secure our elections in this country. And that seems to me, in my mind, to be really the top of the list.
Really important. And I like how you said layers of coup. That's a first in American history. Layers of coup. It's not just a coup. There's many layers and parts to the coup. So I want to sort of end on a hopeful note. New reports show that there is some hope for Democrats in the midterm elections. I don't everybody want to go out and say, there's no point in organizing or voting or anything because democracy is over. That is not true. In terms of the Democratic Party, the Washington Post says Democrats might be able to hold off a Republican wave, including in key states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And in local races in Wisconsin last week, as evidence of this, Democrats did better than everybody expected. What is your reaction? How can Democrats stop leaning into the dread and maybe start leaning into the hope?
It's a really good question and really important, I think, for people to think about. Wisconsin has some really, really good organizing, and they've been really smart about the way they do it. But I would also like to point out that New Hampshire, and there have been a bunch of school board races that have really been surprising, and people have really rejected the kind of crazy QAnon crowd, which the Republicans have been running for those school boards. So I would say that, look, Democrats have the truth on their side, and you don't always have that. I mean, that's a huge advantage. You have the truth. The other party has really hardened against democracy. There's a chance here, this is not just about taxes and eyeglasses and Medicare. This is about, are we going to be able to keep it? And so I think ultimately Democrats just need to tell that story. And there are a lot of really good Democratic candidates out there, and there are a lot of really bad Republican candidates out there. So that's my hope.
Molly Jong-Fast, thank you as always for being here today. Please stay safe.
Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.